Welcome back to Free Media. I'm Amber Duke.
And I'm Robby Soave. Democratic Senator Elissa Slotkin, who you might remember giving the response to President Trump's address to Congress, well, she appeared on The View recently, giving her thoughts on why the country elected Trump as president and what state it's in. Let's watch.
I think there's a feeling in the country, and I often say this, we're about to turn 250 years old, right? We're still pretty young for a country. These are our our angry teenage years, right? We are going through this push and pull where we're happy, we're sad, we want this, we want that. And what do you do when you have a teenager who's threatening themselves and others? You just try to get them through this period alive so that their brain can fully form and you can come back to kind of what
Are
a
you
country.
talking about Trump?
No, I'm talking about our country. We're pendulum swinging. We're pendulum swinging. And so for me, I think that I don't think there's a single American who feels like this is normal.
I mean, the problem with that metaphor is that this is not even this is a time of where we are pretty evenly divided and we have serious policy disagreements as a people, but the Civil War was a time of extreme political disagreement and then actual violence. We've been through some really we've been through other periods of extreme political disagreement. The 60s and 70s to some extent were a time where there was much greater violence in the streets from crazy activists and domestic terrorists, the KKK. We've had periods of bitterness.
Great Depression.
The Great Depression, World War II. So there's nothing really. I don't know. Is this our angry teenage years? I don't know about that.
It just feels like more of the retread of January 6th was a flashpoint for our democracy, and Trump's going to destroy it, and the country's going to be an authoritarian hellscape.
Yeah.
It's just the classic sort of Democratic fear-mongering.
Right.
I've been really fascinated by how Democrats are trying to message themselves out of this massive hole that they're in post-election.
Yeah. Well, they have no idea what they're doing.
Because they keep claiming that they're doing soul-searching, but they're not actually moving on any of the policies. They're just changing the way that they're talking about them. So on the women's sports issue, their response to Trump's executive order pulling federal funding from schools that allow transgender athletes to compete in women's sports is to talk about it as if it's abortion by saying it's a states' rights issue.
Yeah.
Well, not when federal funding's involved.
Yeah.
It's actually not a states' rights issue anymore.
Or at least you can make that argument, but then you had to make that argument when the Obama, I believe it was, administration compelled under Title IX for them to have these policies that conservatives didn't like. And ordering states saying you're going to lose federal funding unless you accommodate trans athletes in the way we are telling you to right now. Was it a state rights issue then?
Yeah, well, and Biden was rewriting the rules of Title IX to include gender identity as a protected class, which would have basically removed all sex-segregated spaces from schools that receive
rewriting
federal funding.
without proposing any new laws, without just saying this law that has existed for decades and was clearly never intended to even weigh in on a transgender-related question or a due process question or a free speech question as it was used under the Biden administration, was clearly just intended to make sure if there was a male team and there was comparative interest in having a female team or club or whatever, that you had to do that. Not at all answering a sexual misconduct, abuse, or trans people or anything without passing a single new law, just reinterpreting it. But they did that.
They did that, and the Democrats loved it.
Yeah.
I think if there's one benefit to Elissa Slotkin's latest screed, it's that it's more of the same apoplectic language that has gotten people to tune out the Democrats and their associated media complex. It started in 2015 with Russian collusion. It turned into all of the indictments against Trump and the allegations that he was some massive fraudster and was doing hush money payments and that he was stealing classified documents and all of that, and that he was going to end up in prison. And then it was that democracy is going to be over after January 6th. And I think people just don't believe them anymore. And that's really, the fact that they're doubling down on it seems like such a miscalculation to me.
I actually I think I disagree with you slightly. I'm detecting a changing of the message a little bit. I think they are not fighting back as wokeness or DEI or whatever are being rhetorically or in some actual ways made no longer government policies. They are, they're still obviously progressive talking heads, whining about this, university activist type people. I don't see the Democrats as a party doing very much to oppose that. I'm sure you can find counterexamples. I don't think they're clinging to those things. I think they know
No, not to those
they're
things
not
specifically.
super popular. I think even beyond their problem of not having a message, though, is not having a messenger. I don't think they can compete with Trump because they don't have as appealing or charismatic or interesting or commanding a person with a presence even close.
Yeah.
They have very elder leadership that is not particularly media savvy or charismatic. Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, et cetera. They don't have really exciting new up-and-coming talent. The shadow of Kamala Harris is still kind of looming over the party. She might very well run again, it sounds like. I think she's going to run for governor of California. Someone who clearly does not have the presence to compete with Trump. And they don't really have anyone else come. I think they would actually benefit from some celebrity type, Stephen A. Smith type person deciding to enter the foray in politics. Someone from outside politics, although the Democratic Party is not nearly as accommodating to
they don't like
zany
that at all.
outside characters who didn't wait their turn. But that's what it takes.
Yeah,
and then the message, you can almost come up with the message later. Once you've found the person, that's a little bit of the lesson of Trump.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, Gavin Newsom obviously is trying to be that person.
Yeah.
He started his little podcast. His first two guests were Charlie Kirk, and then who was the second one? It was another conservative media figure.
Yeah.
But he was like trying to move to the middle on all of these woke issues. But I mean, the problem is, of course, is that all of these people who are dyed-in-the-wool members of the Democratic Party who have been close to the DNC have a voting record on all of these issues. So it's the same issue that you had with Kamala, where she tried to erase her 2020 primary history running against Trump, which is it's all in the voting record, lady. Like, it's all in your public statements. It's in all these press releases. It's in your entire history of being a member of elected office, which is demonstrates your point that it has to be someone sort of outside of the party apparatus. If you're going to reframe these issues and change the party line on them and get the Democratic base on board, it has to be someone who doesn't have all of that baggage.
Yeah, and it's going to still be difficult because, as Newsom found, like, I saw the coverage of that from progressives or from Democratic media being very critical of Newsom, betraying what he said about when he said that obviously he thinks trans women should not be in women's sports, and then I saw that being criticized from people in his own coalition, even though it's an 80-20 issue going the other way. So that's the problem they're always going to face.
Because 20% of the Democratic base is really hardcore left progressive activists, and those issues that they take...
And they have outsized voice.
Yes, they're a really loud vocal minority, and the Democrats have to create basically an entire new voting coalition in order to make up for that 20% of the base that votes really aggressively in primaries and is really involved in activism.
Yes, and we're talking about 20% that is not even, like, left is not even the correct way necessarily to identify them. I use progressive to distinguish from the left in a way where I'm talking about more obsessed with cultural issues and has more investment in the Democratic Party. There was previously, going back 4 and 8 years ago, there was an independent, actually left media that we've had a lot of exposure to from being part of Rising. A lot of personalities who came through there were associated with it that could be very critical of the Democratic Party from representing economic issues that we mostly don't agree with, but had some resonance actually with people all over the political spectrum, and could criticize the Democratic Party and could serve as a platform for people who were going to pursue power in Democratic circles, but were not traditional progressive Democratic types. And that platform has just totally collapsed. I mean, some of the most popular people in that media ecosystem I have seen move, either just fall out of fashion or favor, or move explicitly to the right, like Glenn Green. I mean, these are not people who say they're on the right now, but they mostly talk about things that are of interest to the right.
Right.
Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, Kim Iverson, who I used to host Rising with. Tulsi Gabbard was a darling of these types of people. She's now in the Republican White House. So is RFK Jr. The Young Turk people are more centrist, at least.
Not super excited about the woke cultural issues, but have a progressive economic message, are very skeptical of foreign involvement, question a lot of the government bureaucracy and intelligence agencies, things that have some overlap with conservatives, but they
now
get,
are mostly just conservative issues,
right,
really.
and they get the ideological purity test from the people within that segment who are really gung-ho about the cultural issues.
Yeah, there's no the system that Bernie Sanders built or participated in, this new counterculture, whatever, on the left that was reasonably successful at pursuing the Democratic nomination. Obviously, he didn't get there either of the times, but made a really strong effort, and it was not inconceivable that he could have gotten the nomination. I just don't see that happening again.
And he seems almost irrelevant now for the Democratic Party. I mean, he
peaked, and he's an older man, and he's
been largely absent during the messaging against this new administration, and there hasn't been anyone coming up below him with the sort of same posture in relation to the DNC that's been able to really grab an outsized influence.
Yeah, it really does remind me a little bit of the influence that Ron Paul had for a while on Republican side. Now, you could actually say some of those ideas are now finally being discussed by Trump administration 2.0. The very long arc of history, there is some Ron Paul influence in terms of our foreign policy and some of our economic issues that is finally being felt. But in those intervening years, there wasn't an immediate successor. I mean, his son, Rand Paul, obviously is in the Senate and is doing a lot of things that I support, but it wasn't the same kind of activist movement without that person. Now, I'm really glad that he's kind of shuffled back into the discourse, and I'm pleased about that, and I just don't see that happening on the left for the foreseeable future, but things could change.
It just seems like the Democratic establishment just pushes those people away.
Yeah, they hate them. They haven't figured out how to win elections without them.
It's like, okay, come here, Tulsi, come here, RFK. come to us.
all the interesting, wacky characters will be
we'll take them
Republican cabinet secretaries. Thanks for watching Free Media. We so appreciate it. You can like, share, subscribe our new YouTube channel, which is Reason Free Media. Comment, tell us how you like our show, and we'll see you next week.